You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
On today's episode, I speak with Sage Canaday. He's a professional runner with success at the marathon distance as well as the ultra distance. He's also a coach and also the producer of an extensive library of running materials on YouTube, well worth watching. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Sage, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks. So why don't we start off with you walking us through your running background? When did you start and what was the catalyst to make it a profession?
Yeah, so I started way back when I was in middle school. I was playing soccer a lot as a youth, and my soccer coach pulled me aside one game. I was like 12 years old, and he said, you're better off without the ball at your feet. Why don't you just run up and down the field and be a decoy? And, it was at that point, I didn't score a goal that season. They moved me back from forward to playing midfield. I was just running around. I didn't really have very good dribbling skills with the soccer ball. I couldn't do all the tricks. And I was like, well, you know what? He's right. Maybe I should just go full on into running and not worry about soccer at all. So I quit soccer that year, went in, started doing track all throughout school, and then high school doing cross country in the fall, track in the spring. I was lucky enough that I did well enough at some of the state meets to be able to have the opportunity to run in college. So I was recruited by a couple of different schools, and I ended up at Cornell University, which I absolutely loved. It was a D1 program, but it wasn't like a huge athletic powerhouse. We had a pretty decent team, though, within the Ivy League. So I competed there every season. Just loved it, loved running. Quickly got into marathons actually in college. I was a junior at Cornell. I convinced my coach between cross country and track season to let me try to run a marathon so I could qualify for the Olympic trials. And this is back in 2007. So I'm trying to qualify for the Olympic trials that year, and you have to run under 2:22. And the first marathon I did, I ran 2:22:20 and missed it by 20 seconds.
Oh, wow.
So then after that, I told my coach I want to try again because I want to try to be the youngest guy at the Olympic trials. And so he let me try again in the summer, and I ended up getting it with 17 seconds to spare that summer. So I was 21 years old, qualified for the Olympic trials. And that kind of got the whole process going for thinking that I could continue running after college at a professional level in the road marathon. And that's exactly what I did. Right after I graduated, I went straight into a program called Hanson's Brooks, which is an Olympic development program out in Michigan. And I trained with some of my teammates actually made the Olympics. Brian Sell made the Beijing Olympics before I got there. And then Desiree Davila, Desiree Linden now, made the London Olympic Games in 2012. So it's a great experience. After that, I went kind of full tilt into doing longer stuff, ultra trail mountain racing, and moved to Boulder, Colorado, and just have been doing that pretty much full time ever since.
You've had a lot of success on the trails and in the mountains, especially really extreme mountain courses. So, for someone who's a road runner, what advice would you have for them to make that transition from, marathon and other distances to go up to ultra, but more importantly into that terrain that they may not be as familiar with?
Yeah, so the biggest thing usually is getting used to a lot of the hills and elevation change. A lot of people will run like a marathon, like the Boston Marathon or something, and that, that's fairly course on a road. But if you look at the percent gradient you're going at like up Heartbreak Hill at Boston, it doesn't really get over like 10% grade. Whereas some of these trail races, you'll go up these crazy trails, hiking trails in the mountains or in the woods, and you'll hit, 20% grade uphill. And so if you're not used to pretty extreme elevation changes and how to adjust your pace accordingly, it's really easy to get too caught up with a fast early pace and end up bonking or having all sorts of like leg pain and leg damage. So the biggest thing is to incorporate more hill training into your runs. And, it could be on a road, it could be up stadium steps. A lot of people we coach live in flat areas where they're training for a mountain race, so they have to run on a treadmill on incline, or they have to run up like bridge overpasses and things like that. But you get a lot of leg strength for the trails just doing a lot more vertical in training, elevation gain, hills, And then the technical aspects, though, they're probably the transition. That really takes being able to run like on single track trail, through rocks, through mud, through snow, and things like that. So for that, you definitely want to try to just do more of your weekly runs on, off the pavement and on single track trails if you have it available. But those are probably the biggest things.
Speaking of, mountain races, let's talk about a few that you've done in the recent years. And let's start off with the Speed Goat 50K, where you've had a lot of success there, and it's a pretty tough course. Can you just walk us through a little bit for those not familiar with what that setup is there, and maybe some of the keys to why you've had a lot of success there, winning it, I believe, 3 times?
Oh, yes, that's correct. Yeah, Speed Goat's one of my favorites. It's 50K, so 31 miles. It's actually, I've measured on my GPS, it's actually closer to 32 and a half miles usually. But it's right outside of Salt Lake City. There's a really good ski resort. It's called Snowbird. It's just like 30, 40 minutes outside of the city, but you're up at elevation. So you're starting at the base of these ski slopes at about, I think it's about 7,000 or 8,000 feet in elevation. And then you're climbing straight up the ski slope to over 11,000 feet of altitude. And then you're going back down and then back up again. And in total, the race has a little over 12,000 feet of climbing, a vertical ascent during the 31 miles. And it gets pretty steep and rocky. Some of the sections are totally off trail. Some of them are mountain bike trails and like ski access roads, but other parts it's just you're running through the grass. And I've run into moose out there actually during the race. But you're pushing really hard because it's a lot of steep uphill and downhill, and you're at a really high altitude. So it's a unique race. It's in the summer. It's usually actually pretty warm. But it takes, you really have to slow your pace down because of the hills. But yeah, that's one of my favorite, events. It's actually put on by our sponsor, my shoe sponsor is Hoka 11, but one of my teammates, Carl Meltzer, who's run a lot of 100-mile ultras. He's actually known for setting the record on the Appalachian Trail this summer.
Right.
He's the race director. So he organizes this kind of masochistic event and puts it on, and he does a great job with it. It's a really cool race. There's actually quite a bit of prize money there for the top 3 finishers, as well as like a bonus. Like you get $1,000 cash bonus if you're the first one up the first 8-mile climb if you're leading the race, which is always an extra incentive.
Yeah, and I've never run over there, but I have skied at Snowbird, and that's actually one of the more technical ski resorts inbounds in the U.S. But a lot of vertical drop, very steep, so I can only imagine what the running is like there. So another race where you've had success at, but also you one of the things I really admire about you is you're quite open about with your YouTube channel and stuff, which we'll get into later, but you're very open about your failures and successes and the lessons you learn from them. The North Face Endurance Challenge out in San Fran, you've had a lot of success there. But this year you mentioned that you bonked in one of your videos. So, can you just talk about that race a little bit, and then maybe what advice you'd have for people when they do bonk? Cause I think we all have that at some point. And, how do you kind of push through? What would be some strategies you would recommend in those cases?
Yeah, definitely. It's always a learning process. Even, I've been doing ultras for 5 years now, and always learning new things, making amateur mistakes still. And it does vary, depending on the event and the course and how you pace yourself. But, this North Face 50-mile endurance challenge, it's out, just north of San Francisco in the Marin Headlands. And it's this beautiful rolling hills kind of along the beach. You actually run down to Stinson Beach and Muir Beach, out there and through the Muir Woods. But it's a 50-mile race, mostly on dirt, but smooth trails with about 10,000 feet of climbing. And, it's a race I've did well in before. It's a race I bonked at this year. It's also a race that I think's gotten more and more competitive every year because there's $10,000 on the line for the winner. We're running out there, and around mile 30, I started seeing stars, and I realized I was going to bonk really hard, and I kind of really suffered after that, but then I was able to stop at an aid station, eat a bunch of food, and regroup. But yeah, those things happen. You're always fighting things like dehydration. You're fighting things like glycogen depletion, which generally leads to the bonking. And you're also fighting what I call sheer muscle failure, where your legs if you're not used to all the hills and the downhill pounding and you go out too fast, sometimes your leg muscles just kind of give out in the middle of the race, and it kind of destroys your form, and you're just hobbling all the way home, or you have horrible muscle cramps, which could also be linked to the dehydration as well. So you're fighting all these things when you're pushing your body so hard for so long. And usually what I found, at least with bonking, and it was true in this case, was that if you could eat, you want to start eating immediately as much as you can. Because if you're bonking really hard and it's a glycogen depletion type of issue, if you start eating carbohydrates and you keep them down and you're not having any nausea or stomach pain, eventually your body's going to kick in, your blood sugar's going to get back to normal, and you're going to have energy to pick up the pace and run again. And so it's really a matter of not giving up and not being discouraged when that happens, because the other symptom of bonking really hard is a lot of times mentally you actually start losing it. Your brain is a big suck of glycogen, and when you're running low on sugar, your brain gets pretty cranky, and you start getting into kind of a negative mindset. So you have to realize what's happening, start eating, start drinking. The other thing is dehydration. Sometimes if you notice you haven't gone to the bathroom for a long time during some of these ultra races, and you usually do have to go to the bathroom during a 50-mile ultra, it could be that you're getting really dehydrated, which could be really dangerous. So always trying to be in tune, I guess, with your body and thinking about what you need. And the biggest takeaway, I guess, I had with this race, and my girlfriend Sandy, who's actually runs my coaching business with me but gives me coaching advice because I need it, said that, you need to know exactly how many calories per hour you want to take and have a nutrition strategy kind of planned out ahead of time with certain products that you've practiced with in training, because that way you're not going to throw your body for a loop. You're not going to have to rely on what they may or may not have at aid stations, and you make sure that you're sticking to a schedule where you're getting 300 or 400 calories per hour, so you don't accidentally forget to not eat for an hour and then you end up bonking. So just, things like that.
Yeah. I can relate. I haven't dialed in the nutrition very well for the endurance sports that I do, but I actually hired a sports nutritionist to help me. And I go into races. I do mainly triathlons and Ironman and half Ironman distance races. I run as well, but I go in with a plan, and it's almost mechanical for me. Now it doesn't always work out, but it's sort of, I don't have a good sense of dehydration and stuff. The weather may seem cool, and I'm still burning a lot of sweat, and then if I don't follow my plan, it ends badly. So I try to kind of find a plan and stick with it. So that's really good advice. I agree with it. Of course, it's still, you have to tweak it, and it doesn't always work out as planned, and obviously the conditions change. A question though, related to bonking. I mean, there is a quote I once heard from he was a professional triathlete, but he was basically saying in the Ironman World Championship, to finish number one, you have to take risk, and you have to be willing to put it all on the line, and maybe you win it, or maybe you finish in 15th place, because you have to take the risk. Otherwise, you could play it safe, and you may finish 5th or 6th, but you'll never have that ability to get to 1. Do you think that's also plays into it from a professional running perspective, in terms of having to really push that edge and that limit to really try to get up to number 1 and risking the bonking and other things because it's necessary to compete?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I think it applies to pretty much all endurance races, or even just going after your personal record and trying to improve. You have to push the envelope, and it's kind of a risk assessment where, like, even in the North Face race a couple weeks ago, 2 guys went off the line really fast, and I kind of was in a dilemma about chasing them down, not letting them get too far ahead, and they actually ended up going first and second in the race, and they held on, so they never actually came back. But I was trying to keep that gap minimal between them, and I was we were running hard, and you have to be honest with yourself at that point and say, like, am I trained to sustain this pace? And a lot of times you don't know exactly, especially with these long ultras with a lot of hills, or doing a long event like an Ironman triathlon. You don't want to sell yourself short, but at the same time you need to push to optimize your finishing time in place. You have to push the envelope and pace yourself exactly right, so that you don't hit the wall really hard, but you just kind of brush up against the wall maybe near the end, but so you can still finish strong and probably pass people. So it's a delicate balance, and it's something that changes over time with your experience and fitness level. It may change with the weather conditions. It may change on just how you feel on the race day. But yeah, it's definitely one of those tough balances of risk and reward. And sometimes you push a little too hard and you learn your lesson and you have a really tough race and a tough finish. But other times, sometimes you could hold on and break through that barrier. So it's something that makes the sport exciting, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So let's, besides running, you also have a number of other ventures. So let's talk about those for a minute. So you've got VO2 Max Productions, and you also have coaching. So why don't we talk about your VO2 Max Productions and what it is you do there, and talk a little bit about your YouTube videos, which are incredible source for information. So I want to make sure the listeners hear about that, because it's a great place to go and find out running advice and hear about the lessons you've learned and stuff. I mean, there's over 50,000 subscribers, so there's a lot of people who follow it. So maybe just kind of walk us through, that part of your career and what you're trying to accomplish there.
Yeah, so I started VO2 Max Productions just mainly the YouTube channel in college. I was just messing around with a video camera. I was just like making videos and started filming some of my teammates as well as filming some of my own training. And then I took that when I went professional in road marathoning, Hanson's Brooks. I was also filming some of their workouts and the experiences that we did there. And it was kind of just a fun thing, but I realized that it was fun to do little training talks and to kind of share my running experience with people at the international level through the medium of video. And since then, it's kind of expanded. It turned into our coaching business, which we mainly call Sage Running now. That's kind of the new business where Sandy, my girlfriend Sandy, and I actually coach and have training plans on our website, sagerunning.com. But I keep making all the videos and uploading them on YouTube on VO2 Max Productions, and it's just been really rewarding to hear the positive feedback and to try to improve my editing skills a little bit and to just kind of share my experiences on the trails, but also in road marathons and even on the track and other events, and communicate with people who all around the world like to tune in and watch these videos. So it's been a great creative outlet for me.
Yeah, I bet. And so are there any, so for someone who's not familiar with the YouTube channel that you have, I'll put the link on my blog, but where would you recommend they start? Is there one or two videos you would say are kind of a good place to start from the training talks perspective? I mean, one thing I noticed was the running form video had 1.7 million downloads or something crazy like that. So obviously running form is a big topic and important thing, but what else would you recommend people start to look at, and how would they go about going through all the content?
Yeah, so I guess it depends what event they're interested in, because I have a lot of stuff that's more like road, 5K, 10K, half marathon training, and then I have a lot of stuff that's more ultra trail training and just like fun videos on the trails. So there's different. I've organized the channel into different playlists. There's a playlist where it's all training talks, which are kind of just informative. Me sitting in front of the camera, just talking about a certain training aspect. The thing with YouTube is, since they're with Google, they have a really good search algorithm. So if you just type in what you want to find on YouTube, or maybe, type in my name with that search result, like 10K training, Sage Canaday, or VO2 Max Productions, marathon tips, or something like that, then a video will usually just pop up in the search results. So that's probably the best way to do it. Otherwise, you're looking through the playlist. I have different playlists from all the training talks to my Training for Olympic Trials series to just random adventure videos on the trails, kind of grouped together in those different playlists. But just searching on YouTube, maybe that's probably the best way to find specific topics. Yeah.
And why do you think the running form is such a hotly watched one? I mean, so what's interesting about running form is, and I would love to hear from your coaching perspective, it's one of those things that's like everyone knows how to technically run, yet running form is something that's neglected for most amateurs, and they don't really understand the importance of cadence and foot strike and all of that. So, I mean, for someone who doesn't even know what we're talking about right now, I mean, what is your, why is it important for them to go beyond just being a kid and running around and really understanding how they're supposed to go about running?
Running is a real flexible type of exercise, and you usually wouldn't think much about any technique, but the actual running form is probably the biggest sort of skill that I think is important to be aware of, at least, because it's going to help you progress better as a runner as you start training more. But probably most importantly is it's going to keep you from getting injured, because I think, runners, distance runners especially, it's you don't want to get injured. You want to run to be healthy and to feel good, not to end up in a cast or something. So I think kind of the fear of getting an injury, as well as the fear of not performing as efficiently as the human body can, is what, I think that makes people want to learn more about their actual technique and their running form. And, part of it's kind of influenced by the shoe industry, I'd say. A lot of people are really into gear, and I mean, coming from triathlons, I'm sure there's all sorts of different bikes you could get, all sorts of different wetsuits you could get,
Oh, yeah.
all different ways of measure your progress in a quantitative type of fashion, whether it be heart rate or power meters or, things like that. But I think the shoe industry and in running is, it's big, and, different shoe companies will kind of portray different models of their shoes to deliver certain results. And I think with people, with books like Born to Run coming out, I don't know how many years ago it came out, maybe like 8 years ago, it got people thinking, I think, a lot more about, not only just what am I doing in my running shoe, how do I feel running without the shoes, what surfaces should I run on, what technique am I using? And so I think, it's really important. It's the one essential thing that you really need to try to stay healthy in the sport. And I think health is the most important.
Yeah. And you mentioned one of your sponsors is Hoka. So Hoka's got a kind of a unique approach to footwear. I mean, what is your kind of views on that in terms of, I guess, Born to Run was the minimalist, and Hoka, I guess, is on the other end of the spectrum. I actually got to speak with Pete Kostelnick a few weeks ago on this podcast, and he kind of said the Hokas were one of the main reasons he stayed healthy during his 3,100 mile run across the U.S. So just curious to get your thoughts on the Hokas and kind of how someone should think about those.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the media portrayed Hoka as being kind of the maximalist shoe, which was kind of like the 180 different end of the spectrum from minimalist or running barefoot or like those Vibram Five Fingers. But, they make so many different shoe models now that you could find lighter shoes, lighter Hokas, and actually thinner Hokas. But they are known for their cushion. They're known to protect their feet. I believe Pete wore the Clifton 3, I think, almost extensively in that run. I'm not sure if he talked about which model he wore, but I
asked him
pictures. Yeah. Okay, it was the Clifton 3, which is actually a shoe I raced in that I love to race in. I ran the Boston Marathon in the Cliftons 2 years ago and was really happy with them. I think running on pavement especially, or running on hard surfaces, I love the cushion foam, and Hoka's makes a lot of really pretty thick shoes, but they're still relatively light for how big they look. But they're always expanding with different models, and they got different trail shoe models now that are, they provide a huge variety of different running experiences, and it's best to kind of optimize which model you like the best to your foot, regardless of brand.
Right. So, what's next for you? So, what does your 2017 plan look like? What distances are you thinking about, and what kind of, do you have any races that you're focused on yet, or are you still in the planning phases?
I'm still kind of in the planning phases. I'm still haven't quite finalized my schedule yet, but there's one race that I'm pretty sure 100% I will do and focus on, which will be the Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc, otherwise known as UTMB. And it's a 105-mile race in France. You actually start in Chamonix, and you circumnavigate Mount Blanc, which is a 15,000-foot peak there, kind of in the Swiss Alps. And during the race, you go through Italy and Switzerland, and then finish in Chamonix. But yeah, 105-mile race with 30,000 feet of climbing, and you have to run all night because it starts in the evening. And it's a race that I tried to do 2 years ago, but I actually fell in the middle of it and hit my knee on a rock and cut my knee so bad I had to have stitches, and then I ended up not finishing because of complications with the knee. But it's probably the biggest 100-mile race you could do in Europe, and considered to be one of the most competitive. No American man has ever won the race, and so it's always kind of the goal to try to be the the first American guy to try to win this race. And, you know, it's just a huge challenge just to finish. And it's a beautiful race. I love the mountain environment over there. A lot of great international competition. So I'm pretty excited to go back there. Other than that, I'll probably do some more ultras in the 50-mile range. And then I was kind of toying with the idea of maybe doing a 50K or a marathon, but I haven't decided on that yet.
Right. And so when you have, when you have your season focused on a 100-miler, I mean, are you then supplementing in the shorter distances like the 50Ks or 50-milers as a ramp up to the 100-miler? Is that sort of how you structure your season when you have that A race like that?
Yeah, kind of in a sense. I usually I take pretty much all my races pretty seriously. I mean, there's a huge focus on UTMB, but I will do a build-up race probably kind of before it, kind of to see where I'm at in training. It'll be something I'll race as hard as I can, but it won't be something that maybe I'm quite as peaked for and rested for as UTMB. So last time I tried to do it, I actually did the Speed Goat 50K, which is in July, kind of as part of the build-up to UTMB, which is usually the last week of August or the first week of September. So yeah, definitely kind of work my way up. I also think the variety in distances and race distances is good for overall health and also like speed development, because if you just race a bunch of hundreds all the time, sometimes you get could wear you down throughout the year. It could be really tiring. I know you just talked to Jeff Browning, who had an amazing season racing a lot of hundreds and doing well in all of them. But I think most people kind of struggle with doing more than 1 or 2 hundreds in a year. And I definitely want to respect the distance and respect my body and hopefully keep doing the sport for a while. And, you know, it's just fun to mix it up. I love the speed of doing like a road marathon on flat streets, and I love doing 100-milers in the mountains. So I think it's just the variety is just part of something that I like, kind of just part of my personality too.
Yeah. And it's sort of, actually another Cornellian that I spoke to on this podcast, Max King, had the same exact kind of attitude. And I asked him, I was like, you know, in the triathlon world, there's some old school guys who believe in racing every distance to become a more well-rounded athlete. And, you know, he sort of agreed with that, but he also just said from an interest perspective, it keeps things interesting. So it sounds like you have a sort of similar approach and philosophy.
Yeah, definitely. I have a hashtag motto: any surface, any distance. And, you know, usually I don't go back to the track and race 5Ks and 10Ks. Max is amazing at that. He actually made the Olympic trials in the 3K steeplechase, and he's run a sub 14-minute 5K, and then also run 2:14 in the marathon. I like to go back to do the road marathon and try to qualify for the Olympic trials again in 2020, and keep doing, you know, road marathon races like Boston, New York, Chicago. I love those marathons. To me, there's a sense of satisfaction to running even mile splits on a road and running at that kind of velocity. And it's also satisfying though to go out and do something like the Speed Goat 50K, where you're actually running 10-minute mile to 12-minute mile pace sometimes, because of the altitude's just kicking your butt. So yeah, it's fun to mix it up, and I love the sport of distance running in general and the community. So it's cool to be able to go to these different events and talk to people there.
Cool. Well, Sage, thank you so much for your time today. Really thank you for sharing, you know, some of your race experiences and some lessons and things. And I'll make sure on the blog post that I put with this, that I'll put the links to your YouTube and your website and stuff, because there's so much valuable information there. And I think it's really amazing that you share all that information with the wider running community. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Keep up the great work. Really like seeing what you're doing there. So, and good luck with your training too.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.